Kelly had said she was going to be late.
Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's why I sat next to you. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our Education Committee meeting on May 8th, 2018. I know that Member Sandstead isn't going to be here, and Member Trinka said she'd be here by 4:30, so I appreciate that contact as well. I know that Member Gorham also has to leave, and sometimes I like to. Maybe it's not appropriate, but sometimes it's just like, is there any housekeeping we need to take care of before we start? You know, like in my meetings, just things like if someone has to leave early, do they want to tell us just so when they get up to leave we're not concerned about it? Or is there anything you need? Like maybe some of you need your cell phone on because you're waiting for an emergency call from someone, or you're going to check it. I don't know. I mean, that's something that when I've had meetings, I've always appreciated if we've had an opportunity to just share with each other anything we need to let someone know is going to happen. I think it was last month where I was waiting for a text from my son on a matter that I needed to know, and I wanted everyone to know that I wasn't being rude about that. I just wanted to make sure I took care of that one little detail. Otherwise, I know that none of us like to do that unless it's an emergency. So I don't know, is there any housekeeping, anything anybody needs for us to know before we start? Anything you need? We've all got water.
If we are still going at 7, I will be ducking out because I have a concert I need to go to with my daughter, and I am single parenting it this week, so I am going to be watching it.
Okay. I appreciate that. That just makes us feel, I think, more respectful. So as we kind of open up our agendas and look for things, I'm still waiting for the perfect way to function with the online board book and notes and page numbers of different agendas. And I've also noticed that so have other committee leaders, so I don't feel so intimidated, but we're ready. So it looks like this is kind of how the committee, it looks like we're going tonight. We're going to hear from Assistant Superintendent, and then we have 2 presentations, one from MacArthur and another from Lakewood. We have then some advisory committee updates from Bill Howes and also from Pam Reese, but Amy's going to take care of that comment. We have some grant applications to just quickly go over. We have a number of recent graduates from our different high schools to just look over, and we have some policy updates, woohoo, and some other, just business to do with requests. So again, the majority of our committee meeting tonight is on presentations and advisory council updates, which is always really good for us to hear. So we're going to start with Assistant Superintendent Starzecki's report.
Good evening. I have a rather long report tonight, so if there's questions when I'm done, feel free to ask. And there's a couple attachments also to my Assistant Superintendent report. The first page of my report just talks about some of the staff development opportunities I've had to be a part of in recent weeks. We had a team of educators and community members attend the National Community School Forum in Baltimore last week. I was able to go due to funding from Ed, Minnesota. And the reason for our team attending that conference was we did a presentation at the national level that talked about the development of our Myers-Wilkins Community School and ultimately how we've moved forward with our Together for Health initiative and how we're coordinating between our community work and our school work and our continuous improvement teams to move forward. And the bulk of what I heard at that community school forum was really around continuous improvement and data and evaluation of our work and really reaffirm the work that we're doing with our continuous improvement teams, and much of the same type of structure we're using around comprehensive needs assessment, fishbone analysis, root cause analysis, and the work that we're doing at the school level was very much reinforced across the sessions I went to. So you can see that that's the momentum that's happening at the national level, that really trying to tie in what are the needs of our buildings to the work that we're doing. So I tried to seek out as much information on that as I could. We also had an early childhood summit. This summit is hosted by the Northland Foundation every year, and they are a resource, and they bring in speakers, and MDE typically comes up for preschool and elementary staff, as well as administrators at the district and at the school level, to learn just about how we can better support our early childhood programs and do that partnership. And we had about 35 staff attend that from Duluth, between administrators and teachers. It was very well attended, and again, it's something that the Northland Foundation hosts every year, and they also pay for our staff. The registration is free, and they cover the sub-cost for those to attend. So I know, Rosie, you were there. Bill and I were both there, and I highly recommend, if you have that opportunity in the future years, to take advantage of that. So much of the conversation that at that event was around trauma, and specifically generational trauma, historical trauma, as well as mental health needs of our students. And so, again, it reinforced some of the work that is happening at the schools. The last thing on page 1 is just the mental health conference. Every year, the Minnesota Children's Mental Health Association hosts a conference here in Duluth. And this year, we were able to cover the attendance of some of our staff attending through our McKinney-Vento Act funds, and so we were well represented at that conference too. And again, the topic of conversation throughout that entire couple days was trauma, and historical and generational trauma as well. And so very important topics. Sam Simmons was there speaking as a keynote one day, and I know he has been to our district before as well. So very good information. The second page is just a quick update on the work that we've been doing around the new wellness policy that went into effect this year. A couple things is we have been working to communicate that new policy. I recently did a survey out to our buildings to get an understanding of how well people understand the wellness policy and how well we're implementing the wellness policy. And so there's just continued work around communication and resources for staff when it comes to alternatives to fundraising or other alternatives that people are considering in response to the wellness policy. We are continuing that promotion piece about the walking and biking to school, and I think actually we're supposed to bike to school tomorrow at some of our schools, but the weather, I think, is shifting that to another day because of I think it's rainy and cold. We also have looked for alternatives for our special education service fundraisers that have been happening, and just that ongoing collaboration with our community partners around broadening the work we're doing, not just specific to nutrition, but how do we support the wellness when it comes to the mental health needs of our students as well as substance abuse prevention. And so kind of broadening the idea of what wellness means for our students will probably be a shift in focus for that leadership team. And I know Josh has been on that team and been working through that. And then lastly, I just wanted to share, there are 2 attachments to my report. I shared with you 2 pieces, actually Dr. Lake shared this with you. This is the information that we shared with our teachers. A week and a half ago, we did meet with our quality leadership teams as well as district and school administrators to take a deeper dive into our discipline data across our schools and do some beginning work around what is our data showing us when it comes to disproportionality in our discipline data. And so we have some initial first steps there. We have some people who expressed interest on being on our leadership team, and I was very pleased with the feedback that I got from the team. We had about 50 people attend that meeting where we looked at some data and started to compile some observations from that. And so the feedback I got from most of the folks attended that meeting was very positive and are very much looking forward to taking this to the next step and doing this important work. Two other things that are not on your handout. One is I just continue to get questions around school safety and what are we doing in response to some of the things happening at the national and the state level with school safety. Just to reiterate what I have been sharing with a variety of stakeholders is that we are continuing to review our emergency response manual, and that language, as that language gets changed in our manual, we'll be doing staff and student training next fall. We're looking at improving our communication with subs to make sure that subs understand our response as well. And I know we'll be looking at any new revenue that's coming at the state level to support any capital needs that we might have, as well as any mental health supports that might be available. And those are two different kind of revenue sources that are being considered at the state level. I know our district has newer facilities than many facilities across the state, and so I don't know if how those will look for us, but I do know that that's been the conversation at the state level. And so we'll be looking at updating our practices and providing that training in the fall. And then lastly, I have been taking part in many different meetings at the site level to do comprehensive needs assessment and support staff with what their data is showing in response to the comp ed allocations that have been given at the building level. Buildings are doing good work at looking at their data, identifying what the needs are, and identifying strategies. Some of the things that I'm hearing teams say is the increased mental health needs and behavior needs of our students. We're looking at social workers at the site level. We're looking at potentially having some dean support at some of our buildings, as well as with the increase of new teachers across our district and the increased responsibilities of our administrators. Some of those sites might be looking as well as shifting some of the positions that we have currently that are dean positions. Those might look like assistant principals in order to kind of support that instructional leadership piece at the building level that only principals can do. So those are all things that teams are balancing and having discussions around. It feels like the conversations have been transparent and they're moving in the right direction. So that is happening. And I'm sure you have questions.
Member Oswald.
On page 7, the graph with the different incidents on them, the 8% that refers to attendance, can you describe to me what attendance incidents leads to OSS, ISS?
It was a topic of conversation with our teams as well. What this graphic shows you is the amount, these are incidents that lead to consequences that result in the student being out of the class. So that includes out-of-school suspension, in-school suspension, or it could be that they're just out of the classroom for the day. That could be that students are being truant and they're out of the classroom. Or if they're not going to class during the day, they could be going to an ISS, but it was a deep conversation that we had, and we need to do a further dive into that specific data point because we wouldn't want to be removing students from class for not being in school.
That's exactly
that doesn't make any sense.
What I thought of
yes.
is, missing the school because making you miss school because you miss school is counterintuitive.
Right, exactly.
So I'm glad that that conversation is happening.
Yep.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Yeah, just a couple comments. Thank you, Amy, for spending the time last week, by the way, out at the community schools forum and making sure that we had some of our community members out there with our group. So thank you. I had just really kind of two comments. Today, the Hills had a presentation also on trauma and by Catherine McCall, and I did have the opportunity to go to that, so if anyone wants more information I can send it out. Some of the links that she had that really was a follow-up to the early childhood speaker as well. So I just wanted to comment on that. And then on the school safety, which I appreciated that you addressed, I know some of our newer school board members had brought to my attention anyways an interest in having it as an agenda item just to kind of learn more about what we are doing and kind of processes. And so I just wonder if down the road we could do that as an agenda item. And then I did want to mention that a couple of us board members were at the School Board Association Lobby Day, and we did hear from the director of the Minnesota School Safety Center, and he provided some information I think I passed on, and just really did recognize the work that he's already done and this organization has done with our school district, and felt that we have some really good best practices for some of the planning we're doing. So just wanted to make sure that got mentioned in this discussion as well. So good, thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to invite up then our first presentation from the Laura MacArthur School. So come on up and take a seat, and the mics are pretty easy to work. You just turn them on and you don't even have to lean forward. You can just talk normally from a comfortable place on your seat. But we're really glad to have you here today. I look forward to it. So do you want to turn on our...
You can cast from yours if you want. We're fancy.
All right, my name is Clay Norman, and I'm the principal at Laura MacArthur. And with me is Shane. I'll let Shane introduce herself.
Good afternoon. I'm Shane Johnson. I'm a reading interventionist and a fourth grade classroom teacher at Laura MacArthur.
And I'm happy to say that when I asked Shane to help me with this a while back, she did not even flinch. She was more than happy to come tonight, so gotta love it. So I'm going to share some celebrations with you. This is my first year at Laura MacArthur. One of the things that stuck out to me immediately is how passionate the staff are about the kids there. And, you know, I'm sure it's no secret we have a lot of kids that have some very unique needs in the home, and show that when they come to school. And the staff really go out of their way to care for the kids during the day. So something that we've talked about a lot this year as a CIT is trying to improve the building climate. We've had a lot of behaviors. We continue to have a lot of behaviors, but we've targeted certain areas and looked to improve those areas. One of the main areas we talked about was the hallways and having students in their rooms. Sounds simple enough, but we've been able to do that. We've increased the amount of time that kids are back in their classrooms. We have taken on some social emotional learning and implemented what's called the zones of regulation, and we rolled that out during the school year this year and did some staff training on that. We had a teacher develop a lot of lessons so that the rest of our staff could just kind of pick up and go with it. And so we're looking at that as kind of our tier one, our everybody gets it, general education, social emotional learning, and then we build on that from where kids are showing a greater need. And then something we're excited about for going into next year is we are going to begin implementing PBIS. And so we have a team designated to begin training, and that'll begin with a 2-day training in August. And there will be 4 additional days during the school year to where we will really start laying out how we're going to address and support behavior. Here's our team. Jane, do you want to introduce our team?
So on our continuous improvement team, we have a first grade teacher. We have teachers from every grade level except for kindergarten, and we go back and share with kindergarten in their PLC meetings that happen on Thursday. And then we include our special ed teacher so that she can go back and share with our SPED team in that. We meet at least twice a month, and how we roll that out is we meet on Mondays, and then we share the agenda notes and the meetings on Wednesday, the following Wednesday, in a staff meeting, and then continue any conversation that needs to happen in our PLCs on Thursday.
Okay, so here's a look at the goals that were created last year. And so there was one for reading and for math that all student groups would increase in the percentage of proficiency. And cannot officially report on that at this time. Our data is tentatively, or is not official. However, it does look like we're going to have some gains that we'll be able to look at. So that's a positive. And then we did have a behavior goal that was written last year by the team. The first 20 days of behavior workshop will be implemented, and that was done this year. So just a quick look at our demographics, and this is pretty steady going into this year as well. I do know that our free and reduced went up this year, and we're getting closer to that 79%. And just a quick look at reading proficiency. Going over the past 4 years, obviously doesn't have this year's data on there, but showing overall proficiency for all students at the top and then breaking it down by some different student groups. And a quick look at math. And these are both reading and math that are showing proficiency according to MCA data. And both reading and math proficiency are shown on this slide, broken down by grade level. So you can see that over the previous 4 years. I'll kind of keep moving along here. If you want me to slow down or go back, please let me know. So this slide shows growth in reading and in math, and it's broken down by the amount of growth, low, medium, or high growth, and then in proficient and non-proficient students. Excuse me, students that score proficient or non-proficient. I shouldn't say anybody is one or the other. But. So as we were looking at our data this spring with CIT, we talked about some of the initiatives we have put in place, and staff feel overall that climate has gotten a lot better, and we've been able to implement more behavior plans. We have really recorded data a lot better this year on behavior, and we'll be able to carry that into next year when we work with PBIS, and PBIS has a great system called SWIS that is very useful when reviewing and building behavior data. Based on reading data we looked at 4th grade students because our 3rd grade team was a pilot team for Wonders last year, so students that have a second dose or are on their 2nd year of Wonders did show some good gains. It looks that way on some preliminary MCA data as well. And then what we focused on is monitoring the implementation of morning meetings, so we used a practice profile and did a walkthrough on morning meetings being used to really build that classroom culture, and having students accept each other, and then supporting, and we'll continue to support, zones of regulation being that it was our first year with that. So summary of our continuous needs assessment, some of the successes, again, school climate that seems to be getting better, behavior procedures, collecting behavior data, and then we had 91% of our staff vote to implement PBIS, which is a very high number. There's a requirement to enter into this partnership that 80% of your staff are on board, so we're happy to see that. Do you want to go over a couple of concerns?
Our continued prioritized concerns are the continued behavioral support, the continued support of social emotional well-being. A lot of our kids experiencing crisis and trauma, and how do we best meet their needs, and how do we provide opportunities for them to be successful. And then continuing to dig deeper into reading instruction and reading intervention as we continue to explore wonders. A new curriculum is always vast to learn, and so as we worked with Stacy Gilpin a little bit this year to really understand things and continue that process for learning and growing and understanding the whole Wonders reading curriculum, and not only the curriculum, but the balanced literacy piece of how and building some systems that we are using the same language and helping people, teachers, all staff, develop commonality in their instruction. So those are our concerns.
It's kind of fun. I can share the good news, and you can bring up the
Oh, there
concerns.
you go. We'll share. Yeah. Okay. Good.
So goals that we set earlier this year, we some of our numbers in our different student groups, we either have too small of a sample size or we're talking about just a few students, but we focused in our free and reduced number, which incorporates a lot of students, and so we set a math and reading goal based on those numbers. And again, not sure where exactly we are this year yet, but so that is the reading and math goal. And then we want to take steps to be prepared to implement PBIS and do so with fidelity for going into next year. So initiatives from this year, again, zones of regulation, which I talked about a little bit, and taking steps to be as best prepared as we can to implement PBIS. And our practice profile focus, our instructional practices, or balanced literacy. And so that was a focus for us this year, and that work with Stacy Gilpin that Shane mentioned. And so we'll continue to focus in on that. And then looking at next year, we're looking to increase reading support. So this year Shane was in the classroom part of the time, and the other part of the time was our reading specialist. And so we're looking to make that a full-time position, hopefully going into next year. And then also potentially looking at hiring a dean of students to play a key role in implementing PBIS and help support with behavior and also take care of the data entry piece. And we're at the end. Any questions?
Member Oswald.
Thank you. I believe you're the first people to ever mention in here zones of regulation. Can you explain what that looks like and what it entails?
Sure.
So when you work with a high group of population who are of students who have high stress needs and are in crisis, you need to develop some skills to help you regulate. So the 4 zones are blue. So if you're sad or you don't feel well or you're sick, you're blue. If you are angry or frustrated or raging, you're red. If you are anxious or stressed, you are yellow. And if you're happy and happy-go-lucky, you're in green. So first we identify what those 4 stages are, the 4 colors, and we chart that, and then you have, it's a whole curriculum, and it's a lot of lessons, and then the next lesson is to take pictures and look at the facial features, because a lot of people don't recognize facial features. And a lot of students don't recognize when you are red or yellow or green. And so we talk about that. And then we even play like a bingo game. And you just walk kids through. And then you begin to hear kids saying, well, I'm really red right now, so I need to go sit over here for 10 minutes and take 10 breaths. And so once they are able to identify how they are feeling, then we work on strategies to help them cope with those feelings so that they have ways to, again, cope and then come back and join and be a part of the curriculum and the academics that are happening. It's pretty cool.
I don't know what color I am right now, but I do have one more question. In that, sure, I'll be green. Sure, why not?
Perfect. We'll talk
You're
to you.
smiling, so it looks like green.
Well, what it looks like and what it is can be different. We all know.
There you go.
And the other question revolved around your increased comp ed money. Has your CIT, as Assistant Superintendent Starzecki referred to, that many teams are preliminarily identifying how they're going to spend it? Have you guys thought of how you're going to use it, and is that going to be transferable to the next principal without a problem? And how could you share like what you're going to invest in?
Yeah, I think we can. After looking at our data, I mean, we identified reading as our huge priority. And so I mentioned we're going to increase that reading specialist position. We still feel like we need a lot of behavior support, and so having that dean of students in place for next year, and that's going to be key with implementing PBIS too. And then depending on, we still have to figure out exact numbers, but I want to be able to add some additional support, and we're still talking about what that might look like with our CIT. We've thrown out some ideas like a part-time or maybe a half-time counselor or social worker. So right now we have students that are getting social work that are on IEPs, but we have a lot of our general ed students that could use some assistance as well. So that was one idea that was thrown out there. Otherwise, possibly some support staff that could help with in the reading area, or even possibly work with our dean. So some ideas that we've thrown out, but we've definitely said that the reading specialist and the dean are going to be the two big priorities. And it looks like with our sections that we're going to have also some of that money is going to be used towards class size reduction too. So we'll have pretty positive looking numbers per section. So.
All right, thank you.
Sure, thank you. Thank you both again for, I know, all the time that went into putting these 7 or 8 pages together, and please thank the rest of the people on your team. I wanted to just ask a question about the student climate. You felt that your CIT leaders felt that it's improved due to behavior plans that you've addressed, and can you just maybe share a little bit more what those some of the, like an example of a behavior plan that you felt was successful? And then also I noted about your morning meetings, you highlighted those, and just again kind of give us an example of one of the best morning meetings. I know I've been in a part of some of the morning meetings and they're great, but you seem to highlight that, so if you could share with us on those two fronts.
Sure. I can talk about behavior plans. So after documenting behavior incidences with a particular student and seeing a pattern, what was really common for us this year is to pull together staff that work with that student and involve parents and talk about what's going on and see if we can figure out if there's a root cause or not that we can address. And then a big part of that is figuring out the motivation or what the student is ultimately trying to get. What is the consequence of that behavior? And so for then we talk about what can work. If there's like an incentive that a student could work towards, and we put that out there and have a student be part of picking what that incentive is, and then monitor the progress. If we're going to target a specific behavior that we want to stop, some kind of incentive that helps with the motivation piece, and then measured on a daily basis with like a chart or a point sheet to see if it's working, and kind of go from there. And so we've been able to put more of those in place this year.
If I may, I'm going to go one step back
Yeah,
for you.
sure.
I'm going to
Sure.
kind of do Clay's horn. He's not going to do it, so I'll do it for him. When Clay first came, we sat down as a staff and looked at what is classroom managed behavior and what is office managed behavior, and we generated that list, and staff had an opportunity to input that. We did a carousel activity with the staff members when we talked about what is positive in our school, what needs work, and we have begun to address those. And so having classroom managed behavior, a document that says this is classroom managed behavior and this is office managed behavior, helps define your role, my role, kind of. And then being able to really encourage people to fill out those office referral or even the behavior referral plans. Then collecting that data. We didn't have a Swiss team, but Swiss data, but we kind of created our own format. And so that we could look at the hot spots, like lunch, recess is a hot spot, and those hot spots, and then for even gym class was a hot spot for a couple classes. And so then going back and looking at that and looking at that data and saying, okay, this is where we can offer some supports. So that helped us. We also, as a staff, collaboratively said, this is what we are going to do. We're not just going to arbitrarily send kids to the office. We're going to use buddy rooms. We're going to do things together. And we, as a staff, made that decision to help each other too, so that we're working as a team and we're all on the same page. So that leads us to morning meeting. When you have children who are just knowing your children, like I, as a classroom teacher, have always kept a spreadsheet on my children. And so I know how many people live in their household. I know where their parents work or where their parents don't work, or, you know, who is their brother and sister, and where does all that, I don't skill and drill them. I don't like interrogate them to know those things. I know those things through greetings and sharings in morning meetings. So they get to know me, I get to know them, they have an opportunity to share about their lives, about what they did and what they didn't do. We talk about our cultural differences, how we celebrate the different holidays and how we are accepting of that. And then we play a game or an activity which brings forth laughter. And I was always taught in morning meetings that if your activity is not bringing forth collaboration and teamwork and laughter, then you may not be doing the right activity. So helping people be on board to help do those similar things and saying, please value this, because a lot of people have trouble understanding that the emotional, social, emotional side of school has to happen. You have to have a relationship with our children before you can begin academics, and that is a way. Morning meeting is a great way. And then as you move further along through the year, your morning message, your game has an academic component to it, so that you are continuing to do that. So helping our coworkers work on that together and bringing forth that and bringing a rigor to that helps lessen the trauma and the stress of the school day. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you also for hosting the STEM night a couple weeks ago. That was really great to meet a lot of families that were there.
Yes, that was a very great night.
See no further questions. We just want to thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then I'm going to call up our next school presentation from Lakewood.
Darren, do you need me to cast, or are you going to cast? Okay.
Welcome, Member Trinka. That's okay.
There you go. Yep.
All right, thanks. So we had a staff meeting today, and I asked our 3 people on the CIT, is anybody coming with me? And they said, good luck. I think they're scared of you or something, but no, but they're great people. So I'm very happy to talk about Lakewood. I've been there 3 years. Our PTA refers it as the gem in the woods. We're kind of unique. In fact, I'll invite all of you out. Friday we have Environmental Education Day, which is a great day for our kids and students. We involve a lot of factions around the community where kids get to go to different stations and do different environmental activities. Also, we do have splits at every level. So we have a straight K, and then we have a K1 split, straight first, and then straights at every level, and then a split 2-3 and a split 4-5. So that also does make us very, very unique. With that, I will go right into the presentation. So here are some of the things we are most proud of. MCA scores above the state average. PBIS work, we've done PBIS the last 2 years. I could do a whole slideshow on this for you regarding what teachers have done even in their individual staff or classrooms. Relationships between family and staff are strong. Relationships between staff and students are really strong. And dedicated staff who know all students, not just the 20-some in their classroom. So these are people, as you see, they are classroom teachers because that's mostly what we have out at Lakewood. So Heather Kemp, grade 5, Katie Stresso, K1 split, and Kim Evavol, both is grade 3. These people also sit on our PBIS team, so they've had a lot to do this year. Next year we are going to split these 2 teams into 2. We've decided that in CIT and PBIS. So basically, I'll just paraphrase this. Our goals every year are reading and math, and we like to use fast data because, as we know, MCAs are grades 3 through 5. Fast data is we measure that at the beginning of the year, and we measure that at the end of the year, and K through 2 also does that, so that's why we like to use fast data. Last year we did meet our goal in reading. Math, we ended up trying to look at our goals this year, but it just didn't quite match up, but our MCA scores were pretty good, so saying we're assuming that our fast scores were also that good. I'm going to have to say that at this point. This year we'll do a better job of looking at our math data from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And our fast scores should be completed in about a week. So here's some non-academic data. Mostly we have white students. We have a few special education students, but not many. Free and reduced, we range in that mid-30s range for free and reduced. And so, yeah, there's our demographics of Lakewood School. Here's our academic data for reading proficiency. Back in 2013-14, it was 66. Last year it was 71, so we've increased that. That's good. Special education, however, is low if you look down below. Like I said, we don't have many students, and most of our students are mostly LD. So by very nature of being LD, often they're a grade level or 2 below, but that doesn't mean you still don't work with them and try to catch them up. We do try to do that. Our free and reduced lunch, so there's an achievement gap there for reading proficiency that we are slowly working on. Math proficiency, again, kind of the same trends as reading. Math is probably a little stronger for us right now as far as our scores and proficiency, but very similar to reading. Here's academic reading proficiency by grade and math proficiency by grade, and I did a color scheme here because, as you know, the third graders in 2013-14 are our fourth graders in 2014-15, and so those are each of the years going down in proficiency, and for the most part they've increased, which that's what we want to see every year. So that's been overall a positive. So same as what Clay showed, this is the proficiency by growth. And so if we look at the first, so if you see the number of students proficient, 6 of the kids who were proficient showed low growth, and where we want to see them in whether they're non-proficient or proficient is high growth, preferably, but also medium growth, and especially those students non-proficient that have had high growth, we'd really like to get them to proficiency. We have Reading Corps who works with a lot of those students to try to get them up to a proficient level. And there's our math, a lot of the same trends in math. Oh, I won't go through all this. So when I first came to Lakewood about 3 years ago, there was a little bit of consternation amongst the staff. Because we've had such a high turnover the last 3 years, I think that's a lot of it is taking care of itself. The climate seems to be pretty good out there now. And when I say that, it's not like the climate was really bad. There was just some staff who kind of didn't get along. But now I think that's gotten better. At least I've been told that by parents and by staff. And so that's been a definite positive regarding perception data. So to go into program data, my learning plan is in place at our school, Balanced Literacy. We have 2 practice profiles going. We did to try to gain some common knowledge in balanced literacy, all the areas of balanced literacy. We've kind of done a research project with balanced literacy as a practice profile, and with Stacy Gilpin, we're doing a whole group interactive read aloud practice profile. In fact, she's going to be coming in about 3 or 4 times in the next 2 weeks, and we're going to do some fidelity checks and walkthroughs, so that'll be good. Positive behavior interventions and supports, we have PBIS that is fully in place, at least at the Tier 1 level. We have a green team that's student-led with a past teacher, Beth Miller, and so they are really trying to lead a lot of recycling efforts in the school, which is really kind of cool to see. Professional learning communities, I would say we're developing. We're pretty good, but that might be a practice profile that we need to work on in the future. Key data from these categories. We'll be reviewing perception data. I know I'm working on a survey committee with Tanya that'll go out to staff. We're sending a survey to all the staff in the district within the next couple weeks. And so we've been working on that. It's contingent on our survey that was sent out 3 or 4 years ago, but not exactly the same questions. That survey will also have school data, so we'll be able to get some good perception data district-wide and school-wide for that. Just seeing what I'm should paraphrase here. I've already said this. I'll go on to the next one. So summary of our comprehensive needs assessment. MCA math and reading scores are above state average. Science scores are even usually a little better than that. So that's a subject for pride for Lakewood. Some data from different surveys sent out in 2015-16 does show increased school climate. Some concerns. Because we are a small school, it is difficult to incorporate MTSS, but I think with the help of a 0.5 ADSYS person next year, working with that person, that'll help. Tied into MTSS is some staffing challenges, which I'll talk about below. Lakewood had splits in every level, which I get parents talking to me about that every year, and I think Bill and Amy do as well. This is unique because of our numbers at Lakewood. There's really nothing we can do at this time because of our numbers. Our numbers sit often at a grade level between 33 and 41, so it's just kind of a weird range of numbers. But it's sometimes hard to PLC and configure classrooms with splits, but we do the best we can. Staffing changes every year, sometimes drastically. Classroom teachers often post into Lakewood, and because we are small, our CST, our specialists, AmeriCorps have changed almost yearly since I've been there, so that makes it a little bit of a challenge. Making sure we have the resources to do everything appropriately, we continually talk about that, and continuing initiatives when district office staff or school staff leave. So we want to make sure that those things continue. Sorry, Mike and Amy. So here are our school goals this year. We kind of look at a scoring rubric. 4 is really tough. 3, we hope to meet that, partially meets. We've had a few students leave this year and a few students come in. So that's going to, in a small school like Lakewood, change the scoring a little bit probably. And Those are our math goals below for this year. So we'll be looking at fast data in these areas to see where we're at the end of the year. Initiatives we want to continue: PBIS, MTSS, constant reworking of our CST. That's a child study team, or we call it Collaborative Solutions Team. In the future, we'll want to look at math and PLCs and continue all the balanced literacy components as we move forward. So that's it.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Thank you again, and please thank your staff for putting this information together and being a part of the team. I just had two quick questions. You referenced Reading Corps program, and are you planning on having Reading Corps next year, and how many?
Yes, we will have 1.5 again, which is really nice because they work with that yellow tier that's right below reaching proficiency. ADSYS will actually work with the students below that, which is nice because True North and Reading Corps haven't been able to do that. So now we'll have ADSYS who can actually work with those and be a really integral part of our CST team. So that'll be nice.
Okay, great. And then you referenced the My Learning Plan, and I wasn't familiar with that. Can you just...
Oh, yeah. That's our teacher evaluation system. Did I say My Learning Plan in there?
You did, so that's why
okay.
I hadn't...
So yeah, within My Learning Plan, that's where we do our teacher evals, like right in My Learning Plan. And teachers also have goals in My Learning Plan. We work a lot in there with the teachers regarding pre-observations, observations, post-observations, their individual goals. I might even be missing some things in there. It's a pretty extensive process with the teachers. And of course, non-tenured, we evaluate them 3 times. Tenured, we evaluate them at least once every 3 years. So that's part of that.
Okay, great. And then just the last comment, you are unique with your split classes. And I know a lot of parents out there, and I will say you do have a lot of support for the split classes as well. I mean, and I had my one daughter was in a 3-4 split. She was a 4th grader, and I had reservations too, but it was very successful. But I am hearing really positive things as well, so.
Yeah, I think most of the parents who have questions are new to the school.
Exactly.
Parents who have been there don't really question that. And usually at kindergarten roundup, I usually stop in the music room and we'll have a conversation with the new parents about what does a split look like. Usually that conversation, they're like, oh, okay, I get how you work that. So there's still a little bit of reservation sometimes, but yeah, for the most part, parents that have been there, it's okay. Yep.
Thank you.
Oh, I thought I was waiting for a question. Gotcha. Yep.
So as we move forward, again, I want to thank the leadership teams from MacArthur and from Lakewood for coming and sharing. It's good for us as a committee, and it's good for our visitors to hear the great things that go on and know that our schools meet continually with staff to find solutions and to work together as a team. So thank you very much. We're going to go on with our advisory committee updates. So I will call the EEAC committee to come up and share with us information on their work. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. I know a lot of people in the school district are very, very important at every level, but to me the most important people in the school district are the students, and as such, I brought Lavelle Kirk, who goes to East High School and works with the integration specialist program, works with him, and there's some work that he's doing at the building that we thought that you should be aware of, and he wanted to share with you.
Welcome.
Thank you. As Cruz said, I'm from East High School, and we seriously need you guys' help. Students have obviously always struggled with maintaining a balance of life and their education. Both can be equally exhausting, and while we try, we simply can't reach even half of the students that really need help as far as the life part goes. The school is stretched far too thin financially, and the students suffer every day. We have one of the lowest student-to-counselor ratios in the country here in Minnesota, and other schools are feeling the effects and reaching out for help as well. After talking to a few guidance counselors, students, and teachers, we've come to the conclusion that we could really benefit from having another counselor at the school, separate from the others, that is there specifically to provide support for students. Counselors from our schools have expressed how stressful the lack of support can be. They're asked to help kids through mental distress and help them prepare to graduate, and for some students move on to college. But these are difficult and time-consuming tasks, not to mention having to do it for hundreds of students at different times in their lives, all in the span of 6 hours a day and 5 days a week. We would appreciate funding to start developing a legitimate group run through the school specifically for helping students in times of distress, maybe teaching coping skills or just being there for students so students don't feel so disconnected from the school. Everything that I just said is based off of just conversations and stuff that have been had in the school between me and like just other people that care. And we're not like, I don't have like any like set we want to do this, but like I do want to do something because we do like really need help. And yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, as most of you know, my name is Cruz Mendoza. I've been with the Education Advisory Council for approximately 25 years, and thank you for the invitation to be here. Before we spoke with this committee the last time, you invited us to present our activities and concerns. Our last chairperson asked every one of us council members what we thought about how to move forward as a council. We all agreed that we needed to work with not just us, but also to include as many community people that were concerned with educational equity at ISD 709. During this last year, we have seldom had a quorum. That was also true at our last meeting. We did, however, discuss a number of issues, discipline disparities and restorative justice, the tool for equity accountability, and for something to implement accountability as part of that work and more. Importantly, the need to restructure our council to better represent this diverse community and to advise this district administration and school board. There are things that we all agreed on. We were also disappointed that despite being invited to a meeting with administration, we were never consulted on our take on moving past the removal of 2 books. We were concerned with the states identifying our district's disparities in special education, and to speak on that subject, I have Danny Dumpy here, who's chair of the Special Education Advisory Board and a member of the Equity Advisory Council.
Hi. I just really wanted to talk. We had talked a lot in our meeting about some of the disparities for the out of school suspensions, the disparities that the school was called upon, and also looking at some of the disparities with those same things having to do with children with disabilities who are in our schools. And one of the things is, I work at the state level a lot with some of these things, and most schools the size of Duluth have behavior analysts on site, and to help with some of those kind of interventions. PBS is really great for when you're looking at universal or even maybe some secondary kind of interventions, but when you're really looking at those tertiary interventions with some of the, multiple disabilities that people have, especially when you look at mental health issues and all those other disparities and stuff that are coming into play, you really need somebody who's highly trained in order to be on those teams in order to look at those. A lot of the parents that I work with are hiring their own behavior analysts to come into the school to help with those behavior management plans. And then some people who do qualify for state plans are also asking behavior analysts to come in. The county is also paying for behavior analysts to come in here to look at some of those
tertiary interventions and coming up with really good behavior plans. And if the school district really wants to look at some of those things, I think having a board certified behavior analyst on your team that can look at some of those tertiary interventions can really help go a long way with closing some of those disparities, especially when you're talking about, children with some kind of a disability on top of, multiple other things coming into play. We can't expect our teachers to know all of those kind of things. There's just a lack of training when it comes to mental health and, some of those other disabilities. So.
We also talked about being a part of the effort to advance the Homework Starts with Home RFP. And we've been in contact with Ms. Danielson, and she apparently has filed an application for that program, which you'll be hearing about more. And we have provided Pathways to Learning project with about 25 web pages of resources on social justice in schools. So we take our responsibility very seriously, which is why we know that we have to restructure the committee to be able to provide more information to you. And there's a lot of information we can provide for you that you're not necessarily kind of able to access very easily. We get around. An example of getting around is some of you were at, a few weeks ago, the Local Solutions to End Poverty event. And we have people here who actually led the effort with others to put that together. And that's one of the things I passed out as an example of something that was talked about at one of the tables. There are two other sheets like this that I don't have, but you can contact them. One of them, I believe, is on hiring practices, and the other is on compensatory education. So moving into kind of what the next level of work that we're going to focus on very heavily, and that the Health and All policy people are working on right now, is the equity part of the work that's going on in this district. So the second thing I passed out, you already have, it's multi-page, but I just put together the first kind of main concerns that we had that are kind of being addressed by the state, will be addressed by the state in the next couple of months, and you will get information that is more detailed than what I have in front of me and what you have. So I'll just highlight a couple of points. Equity is giving all students what they need while paying attention to persistent inequities such as disparities in discipline achievement opportunities. There is an intentional focus on multiple perspectives that are valued and validated. Leadership team members have knowledge and understanding of equitable practices and implementation and skills for involving community members in meaningful ways. And define stakeholders to join the team include multiple internal and external stakeholders who are directly affected by the system being improved. Ensure that the perspectives of historically underserved populations are represented appropriately. Determine a process to recruit, select, and appoint leadership team members, including stakeholders who are reflective of demographics of students served and all functions critical to team tasks. So you have that information already, but I just wanted to highlight some of the things that we think are especially important to take into consideration. And I'd like to give you an example of a statement and a question from Minneapolis Public Schools Equity Diversity work. The purpose of equity in Minneapolis Public Schools is committed to identifying and correcting policies, practices, programs, and procedures that perpetuate the achievement gap and institutional racism in all its forms. In order to apply corrective measures, Minneapolis leaders, MPS leaders, which is Minneapolis Public Schools, are required to apply the Equity and Diversity Impact Assessment to all future policies, practices, programs, and procedures that have a significant impact on student learning and resource allocation. The impact assessment provides decision makers guidance on how various MPS communities are impacted by the policy, practice, program, and procedure, and offer alternative solutions so that no community is disproportionately impacted. And kind of one of the questions on the equity diversity impact assessment that they have and I'll only read one, is the internal-external team proposing this action racially and economically diverse? Are the appropriate individuals and/or departments engaged in consultation, ELL, English language learner, homeless and highly mobile, HHM, lesbian, gay, transgender, LGBT, mental and physical ability, racial demographic, religion, social, economic status, special education, etc.? So those are some of the things that we're going to be working with in the coming weeks, months, and hopefully years. We don't want it to be something, not that this is bad, we don't want it to be like a statement. We're very used to having statements come from the school district, and it usually does not have anywhere near the impact that it needs to have. It hasn't happened in the 25 years that I've been a part of this district. I think it's time we need to do something very, very differently. And with that, I'd like to introduce the people who are going to be working on the actual tool for equity accountability. And first, I'd like to bring up Salam Witherspoon so she could bring her team up, and I'll say a few more words after they're done. And thank you for your attention.
Well, good evening. Thank you, Cruz, for inviting us here. My name is Salam Witherspoon. I'm the organizer for Health and All Policies. This is a 3-year grant, and so our partners are CHUM, Zeitgeist, Generation for Healthcare Initiatives, Cross Cultural Alliance Duluth, and NAACP. So we're aiming to integrate equity considerations into all local policy decisions and across government to ensure all policies have beneficial impact on equity. So what Health and All Policies is, we are dedicated to represent voices of those who experience disparities the most. And we are what we're doing is building a bridge to help get all those voices heard and have the voices acknowledged and validated. We have intentionally been working with William Howes on the tool for equity accountability. And so we intentionally provided daycare for one of the 3 Think Kids events and food for all people who attended. We have also been conducting a series of listening sessions with parents across surrounding areas. We also, and our next meeting is actually tomorrow night at Zeitgeist from 6 to 7:30, and this will be like a compilation of all the parents that we've met with and other people who just are interested in being a part of that conversation. And also, like Cruz mentioned, at the Local Solutions in Poverty, we had about 3 different educational topics. The compensatory funding was one, the tool for equity accountability, those 2 were combined, the diversity in hiring practices, and then the enhanced communication. And that's just some of the input we've been gathering from different voices in the community. So Health and All Policies is very encouraged about the tool for equity accountability framework that is currently being created. We see this tool as a way to put equity in the center of Duluth Public Schools approach, and then it's like to intentionally center equity into all decision-making processes and to improve educational experiences for students as well as community and building that trust back between community and decision makers, because education is very closely correlated with the attainment to a lifelong and health and well-being. So this policy, I know it may seem a little abstract, but we see it as a good tool for folks to slow down and have to actually think about what equity will look like, and eventually it will become a habit, not something that is just like a checkbox. So that's why it's so important to us. So, and what we plan to do is really bring the school board members with us, and hopefully we can like create something together by like with the collaboration of like William and everybody else and the community stakeholders to really see how this thing can work and have like different workshops and listening sessions together, and we would greatly appreciate your participation in these workshops, and I look forward to working with you all.
Hi, my name is Bonnie Dominguez, and I was at the table for Local Solutions to End Poverty. I'm a member of HIAP, and I was at the table for Local Solutions to End Poverty, and listening to sessions that we all had with parents. What I was hearing was that there was a lack of trust between the marginalized population, institutions of power, which include the school board and the district. Parents reflected that this tool can be a way to initially and authentically include marginalized populations into school district decision-making process. It can also offer a level of transparency and about how and why decisions are made. As a parent and a community member, I see the tool for equity accountability to restore trust between community and decision makers and allow space for improvement. Thank you.
Sorry, my name is Enrique Mesa, and I just wanted to add that education and equity is a measure of achievement, fairness, and opportunity, and I think we can make it happen, and I think we should definitely hold city officials accountable for it. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cruz is coming back, okay.
As I stated in the beginning, a very important task before the Educational Equity Advisory Committee is for us to basically reform and restructure ourselves. We will spend the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months, talking to as many different people in this community, as many different organizations in this community, to try and put together the best possible vehicle that can help the school district and the school board and the administration be able to hear different voices in the community that are not a part of the integral part of the school district. So in saying that, I'd like to tell you that right now, the people that are actually, not people, the organizations that are actually working on this, and we've only just begun, is the Indigenous Peoples Commission, Health and All Policies, the NAACP, the Human Rights Commission, Local Solutions to End Poverty, Showing Up for Racial Justice, Loaves and Fishes, and the other organizations that have been contacted who have expressed a lot of interest is the Cross-Cultural Alliance of Duluth, the Feminist Action Collective, the Duluth Federation of Teachers, Neighborhood Youth Services, the Indian Parent Committee, and we have a lot of other organizations that we have yet to contact. In the next week, I think, if it hasn't happened by now, every member of the Education Equity Advisory Committee will receive notification that they are all welcome to be a part of this process. That's pretty much all that I have to say, but I want to have Danny finish up.
I just wanted to say that I was so moved by when our young person was here and really asking for help, and I think he's not alone. A lot of our kids out there are really begging for help, and I think that we all need to step up and be part of this process and not be passive and just listening. I think we have a history of just listening and really not having any action. And we're at the point now where we have to take action. We can't just be listening. We can't just be sympathetic. We need to have some action happen, and it needs to happen now. I was just so moved by him. What a great speech he had. It was impressive.
Any questions?
Member Gorham.
As you're striving to build representation on the Education Equity Advisory Committee, how can I, as a school board member, support that?
Whatever ideas that you have for how to... There's also a matter of trust that exists between the district and people who are in marginalized communities. I'm sure that because of the work that you've done in the health field, you've had contact with a number of people and have some kind of respect from the work that you do, because I know the kind of work that you do. Bringing some of those people and some of those professionals even to talk with us about, well, this is what our experience has been in kind of a similar situation where there's been an organization that we've been a part of and it's dissolved into very few people. And this is what we did to basically invigorate the organization. Things like that would be helpful. And anything you can possibly think that would be helpful, we would appreciate. Probably attending a couple of meetings and stuff, of the groups that are working together to try and achieve that. If you know of any other models that have happened that, are different than what it is that we have here, that would be helpful also.
Member Oswald.
When you're talking about the Minneapolis Public Schools equity assessment, and you compare it to our proposal for our TIA, I don't know what that acronym is going to be essentially. How does it compare, and is there ways to integrate them both together, or is one better than the other? Do you have an opinion on how that should happen?
As far as I understand it, we do not have an equity policy or statement at all. There's one that's being worked on and proposed, and it's in the process of being worked on. I don't know. I haven't actually worked on it. I have offered Mr. Howes approximately 3 different versions from different sectors of the community that I have looked at and worked on, both recently and over the years. And I don't know which ones he's looking at and which, what he's taken from where. So I really have almost no idea. I can tell you that what it is that Mr. Howes told EAC at the last meeting was that it was going to be very minimal, what he was going to propose to the board. And he didn't seem to have an idea of how his office was going to be able to follow up on whatever was accepted by the board. That's what I know, and it's not very much.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of follow up on that. Superintendent Grunset, can you share, I know we got an email from Will Howes, and he's going to be reporting next month, I believe. Can you just share so everyone has the same information on what will be reported from him? And then I had another comment after. Go ahead.
Yeah. And actually, the work that's been done on the tool for equity accountability really didn't originate in the Achievement and Integration Office. It is something that we had been working on at the district level on how to bring equity into our decision making and into our policies and to have a greater focus throughout the district. And as we continued to work on it, I asked William Howes, Nauquay, if he would be willing to facilitate some of those discussions as part of his work. And so it wasn't meant to just be, I didn't want it to just be the focus of the achievement and integration. I wanted it to be a greater focus that was district-wide. And so I've been very thankful for Nauquay's work on this, and he will continue to be working with it as part of the district team. But it wouldn't be just his department that would be accountable for training staff and for monitoring the use. I see that as something the entire district and from district level staff and principals and teachers all taking part of that. So not just saying this is the work of achievement and integration. So, and we'll hear more about that next month on the June agenda.
Member Oswald.
So when Mr. Howes gives us this to us next month, how is EAC, and as EAC representing other groups in the community, going to communicate to us whether they like it or not, or whether we can tweak it and make it better? it's a tool that's only as useful as the people that it affects. And so I'm concerned that we may not be passing the best tool, but we're not going to know it. So is there a communication process in place at this point, or is there one that can be developed to where you can advise us on how things are and on the opinion of what this tool looks like and what we should do with it?
I can tell you that there are people who are working on what it is you're talking about right now without the school district. I don't know if the school district has made any effort to try and contact some of these other groups that I mentioned who are going to be actively working on this. With or without this administration, and with or without William Howes or anyone else who's working on putting this tool together, these organizations are going to come up with, ideas, policies, plans that they think should be implemented and accepted by this district. But I don't know that any of these organizations have been asked what their ideas and opinions are for what this tool should be. I know that EAC itself has not been asked. I know that we've been invited to different things that had to do with the tool, but we have not been invited to be a part of the actual working team. And I don't think that any of the organizations that I mentioned have been.
Salam had something she wanted to say.
Yeah, I was just going to call Salam up.
You have to use the microphone.
So what Health and Health Policies has been doing is those listening sessions that we're having is ways to educate the community about what the potential that this tool for equity accountability could be. I mean, it is very abstract, so it's and the definition that is actually on there is from the Minnesota Department of Education. So I don't know if that answers any questions about how it aligns with that or not, but we'll be working on so Health and Health Policy's primary goal is to focus on post-adoption of this policy, because it really is not going to be, because it is abstract, and so that's what we've been kind of and the more I've been having conversations with community, it is a little hard to understand, but I think that if we focus on after the adoption of it, that's why I asked the board members if they would come along with us and have those mock demonstrations of how it could work. And so we're thinking about having it we're working on implementations and strategies right now. So we're actually just using some of those examples state level to keep it aligned with what is already going on. And also to, I lost my train of thought, but accountability. So the biggest piece is accountability. William I don't think his intention is to say, oh, this is what I'm just doing. If it's passed, it's passed. If it's not, it's not. It's really about how are we going to implement this thing and how are we going to hold people accountable. It's not about just a one and done. And that was a confusion between it, is because a lot of, like Cruz said, he's been in the district for 25 years and a lot of things are said and then they're just left. But that's what we don't want to happen with this. We want to see it actually utilized and see people held accountable for the decisions they made. And so starting it at policy levels, starting it with admin, school board members and principals, and then having a trickle down effect, and also revising and reviewing some of the policies that are already in place with this toolkit. Nobody knows how it's going to work. That's why it's being created. So I don't know. Yeah.
Member Gorham.
My comments in response to Member Oswald is I don't think we're ever going to adopt the perfect tool, but we need to start somewhere. And as a part of intentionally implementing it, we need to continuously improve it as we use it and make it better as we go. That would be my advice or my thought.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Yep, thanks. Salam, thank you for coming on up again, and also thanks for the meal at the Myers-Wilkins Think Kids. That was great. I don't know if you had a chance or you got feedback from parents who were at the Think Kids meeting at Myers-Wilkins, where we did have one of the stations that was kind of all about the toolkit and equity framework. Did you hear any feedback on the input that we were working to gather at that event and the other two Think Kids meetings? Just not to put you on the spot, but
a lot of the input is about accountability and who is actually going to use it. Like, people want to know at what level it's going to be used. How often is it going to be used? Is it going to be on every level? Is it going to be for every decision? And so, and we're doing is just like kind of tallying up common themes and then moving forward from there. So it's a lot of accountability. It's really about implementation and accountability, like who is using it, how is it going to be used, how often should it be used, what decisions should be made with this thing.
I think it's Member Oswald, and then Trinka.
Go ahead. You were on first. Thank you. I was just going to respond to Member Gorham's comment slightly in that I want to make sure that what we pass is at least credible. It's not that we just can start somewhere or something. I know we worked hard on this. I know it's been a long time. I just want to get some kind of acknowledgement that it's going in the right direction, and I'm not sure that I've gotten that yet. Because we could pass a blank piece of paper. It's not going to do us any good if we're not going to use it. So that's all I'm referring to in wanting feedback from other places and other people, because it's the difference between starting from ground zero again or walking backwards, or actually being able to build on what we have.
Cruise is popular. So I want to thank all of your organizations for being here. I think it's always really eye-opening whenever we speak with you. I think to your point, Salam, about the accountability piece, one of the things that we heard, I think loud and clear at the local Solutions to Poverty piece around the communication and transparency is helping people to understand what the role of the school board is and helping to ensure that these policies are supported, that they're implemented, that they're utilized, that there's a continuous cycle of improvement, to your point, that as you start to use it, how we continue to improve it. And so, if there's anything that we can do to be supportive of that, of creating some of that infrastructure around how the school board can be supportive ahead of, as you're working on that, I'll volunteer myself.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Yep, and I look forward to coming tomorrow night, and I know there's a couple other folks that I've heard so far that are coming to the meeting tomorrow night, so thank you for organizing on that. I wanted to just also comment, Danny, I appreciate you being here, and Cruz for bringing the student with you. Just some information, I was at another meeting of parents and the principal at East the other night, and the issue around mental health and more counselors was talked about a great deal in that meeting, and some of the things that are happening at East, both in terms of educating kids and opportunities for kids doing their win time right now, as well as we talked about the lobbying that is happening, and that some of us as school board members and the community have been involved with lobbying for at the state level around the counseling and more mental health services. And so I just share that I think there's lots of conversations around that right now, and so it really backs up what this student and many other students are asking and talking about. So just for information. So thank you.
Cruz.
I'd like to apologize for saying that no group had been contacted by the school district. I have all the confidence that the health and all policies is going to be in the leadership of all of the work that comes from the community on this. They know, I know, I'm not sure if the school district knows that we cannot do it alone. We absolutely, positively, without question, know that. So whatever it is I can do to kind of move things along, I'd be more than happy to do it. But I did want to mention one more group that we're in contact with to move this work along, and that is the March for Our Lives group.
The what group?
March for Our Lives.
Oh, March for Our Lives, okay.
And that's very much anything that I have to say. And thank you for being at the local Solutions to Poverty and listening to what I had to say and to answering the questions that people have. I really appreciate it, and I'll never forget it.
Member Oswald.
One comment, one last question. What do you need from the board to reorganize EAC?
I need the board to trust that the organizations that I mentioned and the individuals who are going to be working on this are going to be working on it to create an entity that will meet the needs of as many different parts of this community as possible, and that this group will do everything it can to work with the administration, to work with the school board, to work with the schools to make these things a reality. I've learned over the 25 years that I've been active in this school district that the meaningful things that last in this district happen because there is that combination between the administration, the school board, the school staff, and community people, and if we're lucky, the students.
And the last comment I just had is I hope you'll share the contact information of the student that was here. I feel horrible that he read his statement and left. And so I think I can only speak for me, but I was trying to process what he was just saying, and I don't want him to feel like we slighted him in any way, shape, or form. So I'd like to talk to him again.
I would not worry about that. I gave him 3 options before he came up here. You can either sit here with me, you can go back and sit in the audience, or you can leave as soon as you want to. And he chose. And I'm sure he was very comfortable with that choice, knowing him as well as I do.
Well, I hope you communicate to him that I think that was incredibly brave of him and very articulate. And I support what he had to say.
He was very happy and proud to be here, and he will be back.
Great. So I'm glad that Member Oswald shared what can we do to ensure EAC's resurgence, because in your very early comments, I heard you say that that group is struggling with membership, with attendance, with...
Over the last several years, practically every decision-making ability that we've had is no longer there. So 2 things. One, the entities that basically made up EAC were the cultural centers and the parent groups that basically were a part of those cultural centers. Those cultural centers no longer exist. That's how every one of us got onto that board. That's number 1. But again, whatever decision-making ability we've had is pretty much not there anymore. So there's not very much of a reason to be there because, we can't really make very much of an impact on what happens in this district.
And then my other comment was just one, too, that I was really glad to hear from Cruz, the 17, and then he added the last one. So there are 18 organizations that we feel, he feels, all of you feel have been asked and represented, because I have been overwhelmed from a variety of people that either email or stop in the grocery store or see me in a meeting that are a part of some equity group, and I want to be I would love to have representative from all of those, not an organized, because I don't need organization, but just in a energetic, robust, interested groups representing all of those coming together so that we're not all. I feel like there's like 7 groups and they all want the same thing, but we're meeting on different nights or in different locations. And so I'm looking forward to tomorrow, because I do think that there's some energy to understand that that's a chance to have a lot of different group representatives. But again, I like your idea of making sure that those 18 groups that you listed, if we can get a couple of representatives to come together to form a committee that has power, that has influence, that's listened to, because we truly believe in each other. And I love when I see my colleagues shake their heads. I'm in agreement, because I'm inspired that things will be able to listen.
That's our intention.
Superintendent Gronseth, or was Rosie first?
I'm not sure. You can go ahead.
Can I go first, because maybe you can answer it in my question? I believe that there is in writing kind of the mission, if you will, of the Education Equity Advisory Committee, and that might be helpful just to share with us as a board, so we all understand clearly what the mission is that is prescribed to us from is it the Department of Education?
Yeah. That is kind of where I was going. There's a couple of things I want to say.
Okay.
One is I know that there's some confusion today with email. There's two different events that were scheduled for the same time, kind of on the same topic, but two different groups. So there is the event tomorrow night at Zeitgeist that Salam has been working on organizing. And then there's another event that is connected to the local solutions to end poverty that has now been pushed off. And I know that they originally said the 16th, but that's the Gold Star Teacher Award night. And so I think they're going to be rescheduling again from there. So be watching for that, but I wanted to be clear that those were two separate events.
With the same purpose.
The Education Equity Advisory Council does exist because of board policy that is in place. That policy was written from statute around what was desegregation and is now achievement and integration. And so as there's been changes in that statute, changes in legislation, the focus of those funds and the focus of the department has changed over time. I know, was it last year or 2 years ago, Dr. Parks came up and met with the group. Was it 2 years ago? And started this discussion of, all right, here's what is required for the makeup of this group, here's what the task of this group is, but I think what's beyond that is it can be whatever we decide it needs to be. Yes, there is some statute language from the states or from the department that says you need to do these tasks according to this group, and here's who needs to make those decisions. And perhaps that task and that group is the same, or maybe it's somehow separate depending on the state rules on that. But if we want there to be some greater role, some greater input from a group that we have known as connected to this statute, we can do that. Or it could be two separate groups too. Whatever fits our needs and whatever is going to help us to get where we need to go. But I just wanted to maybe give a little history of the group and how it started and why the makeup was what it is, and knowing that achievement and integration have some requirements of who's on that team and what their official role is and how that might be different from what EAC, the language around EAC that we have in policy. There might be some differences that we need to check out there.
Member Trinka.
Thank you for that explanation. That's helpful. As a person who professionally is subject to the whims of state and federal governments, I understand how that happens. I think, unfortunately, it all too often creates these instances where we are now, where people have been working on this for 25 years, and because it's been shifted around, the focus gets shifted around. And so my recommendation would be that that's not my thoughts, because we're not allowed to make decisions here, is that we set this as a high priority, and it doesn't become subject to the whims of the state or the federal government. It becomes something that we commit to concretely as an organization, recognizing that there are pieces of that do need to fit rules, requirements, regulations, but I think when we have 18 really dedicated community groups who have been doing this for a really long time, when we have students who come here who are begging us for this work, I think we owe it to the district to do it.
Assistant Starsecki.
I'm just going to speak very bluntly, and maybe this will be the closing comment. I don't know, maybe not. Yeah, no, it won't be that. I think what our community is asking for is improved communication and improved accountability. And we need to figure out, how are we communicating, how are we seeking input, how are we communicating what we're doing, how are we communicating results, and how are we holding ourselves accountable to different outcomes for all of our students. And that's ultimately the need that I have seen for the 3 years that we desperately need to create a process for. And I want to say that leads right into the concurrence report that we're going to hear about later. That if we continue to work in silos and not work together, as well as with our community partners, we're going to continue to be frustrated. And so ultimately we need a process to be able to be highly effective in how we communicate what we're doing, seek input, and hold ourselves accountable to results. And I think that's ultimately what our community is asking for.
That might be the closing comment, but this might be the closing comment as well, is that I agree, and we need to be courageous and passionate and inclusive. I'm glad that you listed the Federation of Teachers in your group that needs representation, because in my journey the last 3 months on the board, one of the more vacant things I see is my teachers, my colleagues. And we're not going to get too far with accountability if we don't have representation where they are helping us craft this tool and use it.
I personally asked Bernie Burnham if she would be interested in reforming DSEG, and she said yes.
We're on to page, grants. So that would be I don't know what, is it page 2, maybe, or is it later? So we have 3 grant applications: National College Fair grant from Sandra Rich, Essentia Healthcare grant from Melissa Jansen, and Lloyd K. Johnson Foundation grant for a Duluth Service Learning Collaborative that is out of Denfeld, or at least that's what it looked like to me. Are there comments on that? Member Oswald?
On the MACAC National College Fair grant, it's, from the way it reads, it's for East High School to send 11th graders to the Minnesota National College Fair in Minneapolis. And I was just curious if there is a funding source or other funds available for Denfeld students to go also.
I think we approved a grant last month for them.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
For the same one?
For Denfeld, yeah. I think it was in April.
Okay. I didn't remember it being the same college fair, but that's okay if it is. Thank you.
Member Trinka.
Thanks. I just have a question about, I know this came up last night, and we should probably, I'm wondering if we need to get some resolution about the potential for this Homecraft Elementary grant based on what we learned last night about total drainage costs at Homecraft. I always appreciate Melissa's tenacity and willingness to really literally get in there and write grants and do all that great work. But before we have real public discussion about it next week, it might be helpful to have, I don't know how to reconcile the two.
Member Oswald.
I did have an email from Melissa today letting me know that they have received $7,000 in grants. And she was asking me about volunteer labor and things, and I referred her into talking to Mr. Spooner, and if that didn't work out, to let Superintendent Gronseth know. I'm in the same conundrum. I know that from talking to her that they had secured enough fill from the city of Rice Lake to spread it out over the field and make it usable, but I know it doesn't solve any of the underlying drainage or anything like that. So there's the question of do you make it usable until, or do you just fix it, or or there's all these options, and I think they want to be able to use it. They don't have any outdoor play space there, and that's really frustrating. It's on a really busy corner, and so I don't necessarily know the answer, but I know we have heavily involved parents that want to change things. So,
do I have more comment from the board about what we want to do? Do we want to table this at our Tuesday meeting? Do you want to go ahead? Superintendent Grantstaff.
Given the information that Member Oswald just shared, I would want to talk with Mr. Spooner and see if there's more information that we're not aware of. And I'd also want to get his input on a recommendation on, is this, some of the things that he said last night made me think, well, should we, if he's not recommending this, is there something that he doesn't know? Like, does, if he learns that there's going to be, I can't imagine that that's a lot of fill if you're going to raise that whole field. If you're familiar with the field we're talking about, that would be a significant amount of fill. And so I would want to have Mr. Spooner's recommendation before moving forward.
Can we give you direction to chat with him and have him send out an email so we're aware of what's...
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know that the permitting would also be a concern. There's a stream that runs that entire distance really from the school all the way across that property in the back. And so I'm sure that will be part of the plan as well, and I'd want to find out just what that plan entails.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Yes, I second that too. That was a question I had. I would need to hear from Mr. Spooner with his expertise and knowledge of that area. And then just a kind of a process question with this grant or any other grants, and this might be for Assistant Superintendent. Was this grant submitted with our knowledge? Okay.
We're talking about
the home crop.
The essential health.
Yeah. Just, I would hate to see any member of our community write a grant without working with us.
Yeah.
And,
I was just explaining over here. Yeah.
And I know from chairing the education committee in the past that it has happened in the past.
So as a part of getting on the education committee, they have to submit a form to my office, and through my form, it requires certain questions about how have you worked with the district. And I know since the beginning of the school year, she's reached out and been working with Mr. Spooner.
Okay.
So I've kind of been aware on the periphery, but I know more of the facilities conversations have happened with them.
Okay. Then I think even more important that we have the knowledge base of Mr. Spooner.
Can I go to Superintendent?
Sure.
Superintendent Grantstaff.
And I just want to be clear that if she comes up with the if the fill is free and the drainage is there and this is exactly what it needs, I'm thrilled to move forward. I just want to make sure that we're doing the right thing.
And Dr. Carey.
My only comment was in lines with what Member Loeffler-Kemp was bringing up, which even in my short tenure here, I've had situations where well-intended community members come up and say, hey, we got this money for you. And you look and you say, but this doesn't align to anything that we're currently trying to achieve or need to achieve. And so part of the conversation point, I think, is that if you hear of people who are well-intended and want to try to do something to help, to direct them to the appropriate contact within the organization. Because I just had one directed my way the other day, and I've kind of politely said, here's how we function and the requirements we need to meet. If your grant lines up well with that work, we'd love to work with you. If it doesn't, sometimes it's not a good match or fit for us. And so just being able to have that conversation on the front end before people do too much work, because you'd hate to have to walk away from something that somebody put a lot of effort into.
And Member Oswald.
I just want to make sure that everybody knows this has been, a very long time coming. The parents, headed by Melissa, have been very passionate and working and going through many channels and talked to many people, and I think it's being well thought out, and they're doing what they can. I'm nervous about delaying a vote just on accepting a grant. Just because we accept it doesn't mean we have to use it. Right, because we're not accepting the funds, exactly. So, even if we accept it and we can get the check and we figure out later that we can't use it, we can return that money. It's not right. So I think that's all I need to be assured that it's just moving forward and getting another chunk of change towards the project. So.
Member Kemp.
Sorry, the only thing I would kind of add to that from writing grants myself and also being on grant committees is a lot of times the grant committees, you want a solid grant proposal that knows that things are well thought out, and that gives your chances of getting the grant more easily accepted. So I'm not intimate with this grant, so I don't know where it's at, but I guess cautious us to pass grants that are, if there's questions that seem pretty important, like this one, it seems like does, around in questions that maybe David Spooner could answer even by email before next week. It's just a good process, that's all.
Thank you, Member Loeffler-Kemp. I just have a question about the Duluth Service Learning Collaborative and what that is.
I still had a comment too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If that's okay.
Yep, you go.
Thank you. I think that this is an application that's been submitted. If they don't review it and think it's solid and a good deal, they're not going to fund it. So this is just accepting that she submitted a grant, and we're waiting to see. It's not up to us anymore whether it's awarded or not.
So what is the Duluth Service Learning Collaborative?
I'm not sure if it is.
I looked at the letter. It's signed by Tanya Sconiers.
Yeah, is it connected to DASH and the Duluth Schools Collaborative? And because I know that part of DASH is service learning. Also, there's a course, and I'm wondering if that's somehow attached to this too, with the service learning with BAR.
I don't know. I was just going to look and see if I can find the original.
But I believe it's connected to DASH.
I wondered if it was part of Tom Albright's department. No, service learning used to be Kathy Bartzia's. It's a new thing. Okay. So we're on to number 2, action items. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm over here. Hi.
Member Oswald.
I had the same concern, and I was wondering if we could have somebody reach out to Ms. Gonyers and have her give us a little synopsis of what this is. Other than what we had, it's not clear.
While we're still sitting here, I'll see if I can do a little more research on the actual submission of what was given. I'll see if I can find it. If not, I'll try to get some verbiage out. Yep. Okay. I'm totally sidetracked here. Okay.
Are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go on.
Okay.
Yes, I'm not on this topic
because
anymore.
this is the Head Start grant that Assistant Starsecki is going to cover.
So what you have here is an annual grant application that goes through our school board for approval. So this will be an item to approve next week. This is the state Head Start grant. I won't be able to speak as eloquently about this as Pam Reese can, but what I do know is that we don't see a lot of programming changes happening next year from what we're doing this year in regards to all of our early childhood programs. And so this will continue to support the work that we're doing. And so I highly recommend you approve it.
Okay. Member Oswald.
Which reminds me that these are action items. So the previous Essentia grant was just informational. We don't really need to do any action on that anyway. So.
So continuing on with our resolution to accept grant awards.
Oh, there it
we
is.
We did. Oh, there. Funds for this grant will support the Duluth Service Learning Collaborative, but I still do. Yeah.
It says right here on the letter, there's a letter attached to it that articulates what it's for.
It doesn't tell you.
It doesn't really say what it is, but because I read that too. But
oh, okay. All right, well, we'll try to find out.
Next on our agenda is our resolution in response to the American Indian Education Resolution of Concurrence and Non-Concurrence, and that's also Assistant Superintendent.
Is that me? Oh, could be. Would you like to talk about that, Superintendent? Or would you like me to?
Right. I've been working with this process for a while. So, as you know, each year the Parent Advisory Committee, American Indian Parent Advisory Committee, comes together and develops this document that is really meant to focus on the goals of the American Indian Education Plan and to give feedback regarding things that are working and things that need to be improved. And yeah, Tanya said it's a grant for $1,900. Yeah, I know that. And so the building partnerships with the city and community to provide service learning and internship opportunities students that match what they want to do in life. So, all right. So the American Indian Parent Advisory Group came up with the first 5 columns of this document. Our response as a district is the furthermost column under response. Chair Kirby and myself and Amy Starzecki sat down with Edie House and went over our response to these requests and really left the meeting thinking we had really made some good forward motion, and they felt good about our response as well. Some of the pieces, if we just look at the recommendations, really was around Head Start, and we had some good discussion around this and thought of ways that we can be working with existing staff to build partnerships and to share communication venues and really connections rather than hire someone specific to do that. We need to make sure that we're all doing that work together. Moving down to including the American Indian Homeschool Liaisons. That's what that acronym is.
High school.
I know. Took us a minute too. In the multi-tier systems of support model. And again, we see this as working with within the process, working with our principals, making sure that they understand what the role of our home liaisons can be within that process and where they fit into a tiered process. So we'll be working with our principals to increase that and to increase the involvement of our homeschool liaisons. The next one was really a continuation of work that we're already doing. And so excuse me, we will be continuing Reading Corps. Tom Albright has also been doing work with the public library, where starting next year, all of our students will have a library card, and it will be somehow attached to their ID so that their ID will work as a library card. Cool. And students from all over the city will be able to check out books that way. So that will increase access as well. We're also looking at some other, I have a meeting tomorrow with a company called Mayan, who, because we were in the Final Four
of the basketball?
I believe, basketball, yes. No, hockey, no, football. What is it?
What are you talking about? We're in the Final Four of some sporting thing?
I thought it was basketball.
We were runner-up for hockey.
Yeah. Anyway, all second and third grade students in the state get access to Mayan for free for a year. Mayan is an electronic library. And so we will be working with Mayan to learn more about this and to look at access for our students and our teachers. I know, they just told me it was...
I bet maybe it was UMD was national champion.
Maybe that's what it is. UMD?
UMD.
No, it wasn't UMD. I thought it was the NBA, but I'll tell you more about it after my meeting tomorrow. Well, I know. Okay. Moving on. Clearly not a professional sports follower. Talking about monitoring and enforcing compliance with American Indian education standards. There are standards, Minnesota, for American Indian culture, and we have done a lot of work. And I saw Susan here earlier. I think she left, did a lot of work to incorporate the standards into other areas. And so we do need to hold principals more accountable as they're doing their evaluations and their walkthroughs and their practice profiles to make sure that we are looking for those standards to be in place throughout the system. And so we will continue to do that work. There was also a request to make a hire specific to this area. Curriculum is an area where we've made significant reductions, and I think keeping the level of staffing that we have had in the American Indian Education Department was an investment in some ways because we didn't make any reductions there, and so we said that it's although we would love to add more staff, it's just not reasonable at this time to do so. And then increasing access to peer tutors and continuing Saturday school. Some of these were they were school specific, right? And so we said Saturday school is available at East. DASH has started at Denfeld. There was a recognition that started about the time that they were working on this, and they liked that idea, and that WIN was going to continue at both schools. So one of the things that I didn't highlight in here was the professional development that we did do this year. We took the largest group we have ever taken to the American Indian Education Conference, the state conference, and we have already made plans to take an even larger group this coming year, including teachers and administrators. It's really a great conference that helps us to learn not only more about culture, but culturally responsive curriculum and teaching strategies. And the people who have gone to the conference really enjoyed it. It's a pretty reasonable priced conference, so that's one of the reasons we're able to bring a larger team. And then Edie always writes into her state grant a block to take, I can't remember how many, she probably takes about 10 people as well. And so we should be there with a team of about 15 to 20 people next year, which is great, and it's being held in Hinckley this year.
Oh.
So, or next year, rather. We on and then the next couple of lines are things that are just going to be maintained, and then the last piece was having a Ojibwe specific coordinator for Masabakong, the immersion program. We do currently have a 0.6 coordinator for the Spanish program, and there's a full-time coordinator for Masabakong that's grants supported. The request was that we continue that at full-time. We did agree to continue it at a 0.6, so it was the same level as the Spanish program. They are working on some grant opportunities to see if they can make up a 0.4 difference, but we'll learn of that if they get the grant.
Can I just add one thing?
What a member starts. No, you're not a member. Assistant Superintendent Starsecki. There's joining the mic's on.
I just want to reiterate what I was saying earlier, that my biggest takeaway from this process for the last couple years has been that not all the players who need to implement this plan are always at the table and well informed as to what are the strategies that are trying to be implemented. And it goes back to, we need to create systems in this district so that we have all stakeholders at the table and we can hold ourselves accountable to the work that we said we're going to do. And that's one of my biggest takeaways from this process, is we have to get all stakeholders who can impact this work informed as to what this looks like, because there's some good stuff in here. So.
The only thing I was going to add to what Superintendent Grantz has said is that the 0.6 position that we currently have for helping coordinate Spanish immersion is also responsible for coordinating our district-wide ELL program. So that it's not just 0.6 for the immersion, it's also all of our ELL coordination. That said, I still think the 0.6 for this is completely appropriate, because as you go up grade levels with curriculum development, especially because there are no resources or very few resources specifically designed for elementary classrooms in the Ojibwe language, it's a huge undertaking to try to create those materials in-house as you go. And I think it puts some unique stressors on our immersion teachers that they are trying to create their curriculum as they teach it and give feedback to kids. So I think there's a lot of logic in investing in front-end curriculum development, especially for those programs as we phase them in.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Yeah, two questions. At the MAIE conference that you talked about, I'm hoping that Edie will be bringing a lot of students like they did this past one, and if that was part of the discussion, I just would hope it would be, because that was great. And then secondly, Assistant Superintendent, you talked about all stakeholders at the table, and I just wonder if you have, from now going through this process, some recommendations on who was missing and at what point should they be at the table, and who should be inviting them at the table, and just kind of, without going into too many details.
I'm a big believer in not looking at things in isolation, and so this to me is also a bigger issue for other student groups in our district, and so I think there needs to be a process for us to be able to gather input from our community and our parents about how they feel things are going and ideas that they have, and how are we working together. I think some specific stakeholders that aren't, and Superintendent mentioned one of them, was early childhood, as well as principals and teachers, knowing that this exists and this is the work that we need to do. So Ultimately it's I see it throughout many different layers. One, it's at the beginning of development of this documentation. It's also throughout the process to monitor our work, and then also how did we do, that all of those people need to be at the table. And it's broader than this group, I think. I think it needs to be across other student groups.
Great, thank you.
Member Oswald.
And that's why I personally am really going to miss you, because I can appreciate your passion for wanting to create those systems, and I really hope our new hire can inherit some of that passion and follow through. My question is knowing that we have one of the very few, if only, Ojibwe programs in the nation, do we advertise our program and or possibly sell our curriculum?
I think there's a distinct possibility to do that down the road should other programs like this start to come into existence. That said, I've been in the game before of trying to create curricular resources in other positions that you then can replicate and use in other settings, and it's a very different level of investment to come up with that kind of a product versus something that's just meant for your own internal people who help develop it themselves. And so I think there's an opportunity potentially, but I think it would be fairly limited because we're not investing the kind of money you would need to create kind of a commercially appropriate product.
One of the sessions that I went to at the conference was really a collaborative of sharing videos and audio and lessons and books. And one of the things that I learned while I was there is that there are many variations on the language, and so it's very regional specific. And so while we might be creating books or documents or lessons or videos, the language is slightly different. And so there was some challenge around how to share those materials, and it was
exactly
very specific.
Exactly to the superintendent's point. One of the conversations we've had with the current Ojibwe program coordinator is that one of the issues is two of our staff, Majigwaneash and Akoyashik, are both from Canada, and that it is a regionally different dialect than the local Ojibwe that's spoken in our area of Masabekong. And so the issues are part of the curriculum writing complication is you've got people who are from this region working with people who are from Canada who have two different regional dialects of the same language and trying to come to agreement on how you're going to resolve that. So it's a very real thing.
Member Trinka.
Thank you. I just have a few quick questions. For the read well by grade 3, where there's nothing, is that because the choices where to be put, the energies are being put in other areas now as a priority, like the kindergarten readiness and early childhood pieces? Or maybe my document's just missing that line.
I don't have it either.
Okay.
No, you're right. They chose to focus on the areas that they listed,
Okay.
and they didn't have anything for that
Okay.
area.
Because if I remember correctly from the stats, our Native American populations aren't reading at the same level as the rest of our students. So I recognize that resources are stretched very thin, and but I was just curious in case it gets brought up. This is probably for Dr. Carey. The question about the relatable literary content, it doesn't, all I'm seeing in that is that they will increase accessibility to electronic literature. Who helps set that direction around providing access and identifying what the relatable literary content is?
To be extremely honest, we haven't had a lot of budget over the years to do much in terms of curriculum adoption or updates. There are still many courses we have where our resources are from the late 90s. And so we've had lots of conversation about how do you update things where you're getting diverse perspectives included, but there's been some resource limitation in terms of our abilities to do that.
Okay.
Part of the conversation around some of the novel replacement that we've been kind of embroiled in, I'll say, going forward is about exactly that as well, is how do we use that as an option or opportunity to diversify the perspective of the authors in some of our resources that we use.
Okay. And I suppose if we have access to free books for a year or two, that might, although if people don't have if it's electronic, they might not be able to access it. Okay. The last question I think is in relation to the make sure all teachers are aware of, knowledgeable, and teach the American Indian state standards. We heard earlier from one principal, at least, that they do staff evaluations every 3 years. And if this is an annual report, isn't this an annual report? How do you do that if you're only monitoring them once every 3 years?
It's not that they're monitored every 3 years, it's that we do a formal evaluation every 3 years. So if we're including that in our walkthroughs and our profile practice, each teacher every year has a My Learning Plan, so they have personal goals. But as the continuous improvement teams are working on, these are the skills that we need to see, this is what we're working on, they develop a rubric of, if we say it's a profile practice. So if we're all working on implementing a strategy, we all agree on what that looks like, what it sounds like in a classroom. And then when the principals are doing their walkthroughs throughout the building, they are giving feedback on those profiles of practice. So if we are focusing on evidence that would show that American Indian standards are in the classroom, then we can be providing feedback on that besides the formal evaluation every 3 years.
Dr. Carey.
The other thing that I would add to that is that from a teaching and learning standpoint, we've done a lot of curriculum work over the last few years, but one of the things that we've lacked, I think mostly because of budget, is a centralized repository or tool where we house all of that. We've used Google, essentially, and tried to kind of make makeshift use of Google to house our curricular resources, but it's a little bit unwieldy from a monitoring standpoint. Part of what board leadership asked was that I give kind of an outgoing curriculum director report next month, and that there be a regular curriculum director report going forward. And part of one of the things I would talk about is I was investigating until we ran into some budget issue, what the cost would be around purchasing and implementing the use of a kind of district-wide single curriculum repository so that we can better monitor whether or not we're actually teaching what it is our plan says. It's a common kind of saying in curriculum circles that you have the written curriculum, you have the taught curriculum, and you have the tested curriculum, and they are not always the same thing. And what we want is alignment there. And we don't currently have a very good process for monitoring whether or not that's occurring.
So just a quick
Member
follow-up.
Trimble.
I'm wondering if that would be like a great opportunity for a grad student or a PhD student so that we're not having to purchase it, but maybe something that we could develop.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
That's a great idea to explore. Two thoughts. One is on the recommendation, I'm sorry to go back to the kindergarten readiness one, but what you said, Amy, made me think, was Pam Rees and Head Start involved with this, and was she one? Okay, because I was at with Pam and staff of Head Start last week for a federal review that they were doing, and this came up in terms of just training of staff around cultural competency and diversity, and Pam had trained all her staff 2 years ago, and there's plans for next year. So I hope that doesn't kind of get lost, the work that she is planning for in this discussion and with that input on here someplace, because I know she has plans in place, and I know that's an important topic, as you know, for her as well. And then my last comment is, I know it's not your last meetings, Mike and Amy, but it's really going to be sad to have you guys gone, and I just so appreciate the feedback that you're just putting into place and providing us right now as we move forward and go through our own transitions. And so I just got a little teary-eyed as you both were talking.
We'll just...
Yes, that's bullying now.
We'll just let that settle for just a minute there, a little emotion. But that's long enough. We're on to diploma requests. We have 17 of them. Do I have to read them all right now? So next Tuesday I will, though, right? Yep. Yes. Diploma requests, 17. Woohoo! Congratulations to them all. Oh, there's 18. I'm sorry, there's 18. 18 seems to be our theme. So there's 18. 18 is an important number for tonight, and so is accountability. If you notice, almost every conversation we have ends in accountability. And someone who's been in a classroom for a long time, you know, sometimes the accountability really rests a lot on our teaching staff. And I sometimes worry about all of the things we've talked about tonight, because I also know that our teachers are overwhelmed with their own work and their classes and their curriculum. And so I worry about adding a tool of equity. Not that, I mean, I know they're going to embrace it, and they know it, they live it, they see it. They're going to give us such rich feedback. But I do, you know, they are the accountable part, and sometimes they get really nervous. And yeah. So, and then we have no policies? No policy updates. Okay. And then there's no extended trips. So we look forward to curriculum report and technology plan update. It looks like, June is going to be so full, but it's a budget. Well, this is the education. I know. Okay. We'll be rolling. Okay. But it looks like we have policy updates in the future. Is that like next month? No, it doesn't say in a month. So I adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much.